Welcome to the Nuclear Leader Podcast. I'm your host, Bill Nowicki, a former electrician's mate on the USS Minneapolis-St. Paul turned nuclear industry veteran with over 40 years of experience. From the U.S. to plants worldwide, I've not only led large engineering organizations, I've helped train nuclear leaders who keep nuclear power safe and strong. Each episode, we dive into the stories, challenges, and strategies of the dedicated people driving this vital industry. Let's spark some leadership excellence together. John Vukovics is a big friend of mine. I've known him for several years. Very thoughtful, deliberate, highly technical, analytical, but he also understands leadership. I think you're really going to enjoy this episode with my friend, John Vukovics. I don't know your background, but you are now in Louisiana, and you're obviously not from Louisiana, I'm guessing, but how did you end up down there?
So after high school, I had an idea maybe I wanted to be an Air Force pilot.
Ah,
But color blindness limited my choices. I was at Texas A&M University in engineering. I'm originally from the Chicago area, the suburbs. So I thought, hey, I'd probably love to do nuclear. There's great nuclear industry starting in Illinois, as you well know.
yeah.
And so I got a degree and then a master's in nuclear engineering. Got accepted to Riverbend Station for Gulf States Utilities, which is now Entergy. And I had the opportunity to be a reactor engineer for close to 28 years.
Yeah. It's such a fascinating field too, because I want you to talk a little bit about so you had a very technical job for folks that don't know reactor engineering, and I certainly don't, but just how you set up a core and design it, how to help operations with moves. So it's a very technical thing, but somehow you have to translate that technical ability into communicate with other folks. How was that transition, or how did you learn that skill is a better question.
We had like really good mentors, engineers that I worked with
Ah,
who had been operating at the plant there. So it's really a lot of on-the-job training such that, okay, next month we're going to get into fuel movement. Next month we're going to do a startup. Next month we're going to do some different type of test. And so these activities, they're well scheduled in advance and they have to be done. Like you have to refuel.
yeah.
So these things can't really be put off. And you get the opportunity to participate. You're taught small tasks, you're entrusted with them, and they move on to larger and larger tasks. But essentially, whenever talking to friends who don't know exactly what I do and they know, and you don't want to try to get into the mechanics or the science of it, I say, we prepare the technical products that tell operators where to move control rods and where to move fuel. So we're just basically giving people directions of where to put things. And that's my most simple way of describing what we do.
Was there any early on moments or stories that you remember from your initial interactions that kind of relate that?
I think probably when I first joined there, another engineer and we were given the task to do the core shuffle. And we didn't know anything about that. The core has 624 fuel assemblies, and you're going to basically take some out. They're going to be discharged. You're going to put new ones in. And then for the 2/3 of the core, they get shuffled around. And there's all sorts of rules associated with that. And there's software. And it turns into a game of how can I get from this configuration of 624 bundles to the next configuration of 624 bundles in the fewest moves. And a friend of mine at the time, he was a licensing engineer and he was helping us out. We just stayed in the office late until 6, 7 o'clock at night, trying to make it better and better, and then got the product done and moved fuel. And it was very fun, very exciting at the time. Now they use different software. There's different engineers at the site that do that.
Yeah.
Pretty
And what
cool.
about your interactions with operations? One of the biggest challenges I had is as an engineer, making things relevant to operators. How did you learn that skill?
I think that just takes practice. And that's the part of the job that's not, it's a bit technical, but then it's also a bit just communicating with other individuals. So there's a certain decorum you have to have in the control room, professionalism, communications, the three-legged communication, so that people understand what you're saying.
What's the three-level communication?
The three-legged communicate. So if you're talking to operator and we're going to commit to this particular predictor or this particular core maneuver, and they're like, I understand we're doing this particular core maneuver. That is correct. You don't want to have any miscommunications in the control room with intention or direction. There are other times, though, in briefings, you don't have to have that level of communication. You just simply have conversation. But I learned quickly that don't try to explain it the way you understand it, or I understand it. Explain it in the terms that the way they're going to visualize it or they're going to execute it. So if we're moving control rods, if we're going to move 4 control rods, I would say each control rod is going to maybe give us about 4 megawatt electric change. And that related to them because when they moved that control rod, that's what they wanted to see. They wanted to see that power change. Now, all the other things with the thermal limits and the positioning, that's in the instructions, that's in the briefing. But I knew that this is what he's going to be looking for to know that's been done correctly.
Yeah, and I think what you're describing is building trust with folks is the core element of what you did. How did you maintain that trust over your 28 years at Riverbend?
A lot of goodwill. Also, you want to be right. If you tell an operator this is going to happen and it happens that way, that builds your currency. Right now, I'm contracting, we're mentoring new engineers. And my discussions with them when they interact with the group is be succinct, be precise, and that's going to build your currency with them. They're going to start to trust you more and more in any kind of interactions you do in the control room. I have the privilege and also the risk of being there so long that a lot of times people will just go with what I say. No, it's important. There's the error of overconfidence, right? I'm not always going to be correct. And I want to always be challenged in the control room by either the engineers that are coming up. I want to be challenged by the operators that have been there a long time and by the operators that have been there just a short amount of time. I do tell them that. We brief on that so that at the end of the day, we get from where we were going to start and we get to where we were going to end up in a power maneuver or a test or anything else that we wanted to do.
Yeah, and to me, it's so much more than being technically. When you talked about being challenged, I could see that, especially young people that haven't been in that critical position very much or even at all, would be challenged with that. And it's that development. How do you make sure you're keeping them, you're nudging them, but you're not forcing them too far so they feel so overwhelmed that they just check out and give up?
I try to make it fun. I try to say it's exciting. In my opinion, it's exciting. I said, hey, you have your own reactor, right? You were in college a few years ago. Now you have the responsibility of a real power reactor. So there's what I call a cool factor to that. The operators, they really trust us. They interact with a lot of engineers, design engineers, system engineers, but we have a kind of unique and special relationship with them with respect to reactivity management. We serve them, we're brothers to them, sisters to them. And so they get comfortable from a relationship perspective, right? We should have a good relationship in the control room, be relaxed, be calm, just take it one step at a time. And I think they really gravitate to that. And they like when things get done, things that they get planned and they see being executed. It gives them a lot of satisfaction. And then afterwards, I go, that wasn't so hard, was it? And they go, no, it wasn't. And I go, okay, good. So now they're just becoming more and more accustomed. They're not nervous in the control room. But at the same time, I say you always need to have what I call healthy anxiety. You have to be aware of at all times where we are in the power maneuver or anything like that. Be comfortable to do your job and not be nervous, but also be aware that we are in a nuclear reactor changing power.
Yeah, you're almost in that sweet spot where you have a little bit of stress, but not too much where you can't think anymore.
And we bring them out to the field. I thought that was really good in the outage.
Yeah.
There's the reactor like there it is. Like in the control room, we're looking at monitors, we're looking at programs, we're looking at numbers that change. That's the reactor power, that's the reactor flow. These are the thermal limits. Then you take them to the field and you go, there's the reactor, there's the fuel. Here's fuel receipt, there's your fuel bundle. Go up to it, put some white gloves on. We're going to go to the warehouse. These are the control rods. Open the box up, take a look at them. These are what they actually are. My approach to that is to show them like it's real.
Yeah.
And
It's not a video game or something.
yeah, I do
Right.
sometimes say the video game thing. I said, I don't want you to feel so comfortable, but I also want you to feel relaxed. And I also want them to go home to go. And I think this is really important with young engineers that they have a good sense of purpose. They go home and they're like, my job has a tremendous amount of purpose. I have responsibility and I have the duty and the responsibility to make it better. There's a lot of procedures. There's a lot of tests. There's a lot of ways. And I go, I'm probably killing them all the time with, why don't you make that better? Why don't you revise this? Why don't you use a better system? Make it your own, because then when you have that ownership, I think that's what'll give them a lot of satisfaction as individuals.
Yeah. And it must be fun for you, especially our age range, I'll
Yeah.
just say, to watch people develop in their roles and never been in that position before.
We had an engineer we hired in July of last year, and he was given the responsibility to do the core shuffle. And we brought in another mentor to help him learn the code. He spent a lot of time developing it, and he had all the maps for shuffling the core. And then the outage came, and he went to the bridge to see the fuel movement occur with the plans that he developed. When he came back, he had a little smile on his face. And I said, did you like it? And he goes, yeah, I really did. And I said, it's cool to see your work in action, isn't it? And he goes, yes. And I was like, good. That to me that's my pick. Of course,
Yeah.
now he's the one who did all the real work. He's the one who put all the effort in. But I was so glad that he went out there and saw that it's not just paperwork, what you're doing. It's not just some kind of coding for hours at end.
Yeah. One of the things I love about this podcast and what we're doing right now is there's so much skin in the game. It's not academics and teaching, which, that has its own role. I understand that, but your decisions have impact as a reactor engineer with safety. And it's one of the three elements of keeping nuclear stuff from getting into the public. You have that credibility. And obviously, you have a large amount of credibility. And for the people listening to this, you almost have that FM DJ voice where you have a calming effect when you speak. Do you feel like you developed that over time, or is that kind of your personality?
It's probably a little bit personality. I think I developed it too. I watched other people. I can't take a list of all the individuals that I worked with who gave calming speeches in critical moments. At the end of my time as a reactor engineer, the site sent me to INPO. I worked in configuration management, much like you did in engineering. And I got to learn from some really excellent individuals. I'll mention one, you knew him, Carl Fowler. The way he presented to leadership or to engineers or how he conducted interviews. So you build on that. I build my own talents, my own skills on what I see other people do and how they manage communication. I'm not at all perfect. There's a lot of room to grow, but I try to keep developing that and teach others whatever little bit of knowledge I have.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about the organization, because one of the challenges I think many stations have dealt with is not a lot of reactor engineers, and people leave for better deals or whatever. How has dealing with those organizational forces been in your career, and how have you dealt with them?
Wow, that's a really good question. I think a lot of times when people make those changes in their career, they're just natural changes. It has nothing to do with necessarily the position or the job. They found it rewarding, they found it exciting, but new things come in life. And sometimes they're as simple as I'm going to get married and we're going to move somewhere else. I'm going to have a family, or I've got an opportunity to work at a different utility or fuel vendor. There are times, though, I know operations were very challenging. Equipment reliability or fuel failures require a lot of different power maneuvering. Either you're starting the plant up, you're shutting the plant down, you're doing testing. And of course, that requires your team to be there 24 hours a day. And if those kind of activities are extensive, people get burned out, just like any other kind of high demand job.
Thinking about changing your work process, it seems daunting, but it doesn't have to be. Next Axiom has a really easy implementation. I've talked to the folks that work there. They make it so that they understand how things work at your plant, and they put in tools that you can easily use pull down menus to select different options that you want. It's really seamless, and they make sure you're successful. They've created this company to reduce the amount of errors, to reduce root causes, and make you more successful. Contact my friends at nextaxiom.com. So, how did you deal with those
Oh,
challenges? I suspect you always wanted two more people than you had and all that good stuff, but
as a contractor, we're helping the supervisor. They're building a kind of a new team where I'm at right now, and it's going really well. And also knowing and telling people that there's going to be a change. You're going to have this great team now. You're going to get them to a point of being everyone's qualified. Everyone enjoys each other's teamwork and company. And then someone is going to make a change. And to understand that's going to be part of the natural process in this career. That is going to be the natural process site. Be constantly preparing the next individuals to come up, and your training, your processes, get them set up in a manner so that when you do have to hire new, that they can move succinctly into the new position. To accommodate people's desire to do the work, to stay in the position, do you have a group of 4 people who like to work with each other, that have a sense of purpose and mission? And if that's developed, that team is going to work together for a long time.
and
And
if
be
you
honest
don't,
with them. Yeah, be honest with them.
yeah, what you're describing and what your career is all about is there's a lot of really intense technical things when people are drawn to, but there's also the people side. And what does the future in your mind look like where you have a 24-hour business, and if you have a fuel failure, you might turn someone's life upside down for a period of time? How do you attract people into that type of environment in the future?
I think it's good to talk at the university level. I'm real fortunate, or it's just unusual circumstance. My neighbor is chairman of LSU Mechanical Engineering. Yes. So hey, we have some minor nuclear classes. Would you mind coming in and teaching a few things on neutron life cycle? I'm like, sure, let's do that.
Huh.
So one semester I got to teach 7 classes on top of the actual professor's work. And then we got to bring a few of his students up to the simulator. And it was amazing because LSU is about 35 miles from River Bend. And some of the students didn't know there was a nuclear site. And I told them, yeah, there's another one down near New Orleans. And they were like, really? They came out. We were in the simulator. They did some work in the simulator. They got to see the physical site. And I would say 20% of them, they really were like, oh, they could start to see themselves doing this kind of work. So for the future, I think keep doing stuff like that, talking about it. This podcast, this is great. May it continue other people's interest in this industry.
Yeah.
And in electricity, making electricity, super necessary. And that's what draws people's interest. That's what drew my interest.
Yeah.
It's probably what drew your interest, right? When you went up to Calvert, you wanted to do something purposeful. I think that's the natural way of people. They want to do something purposeful. They just have to be introduced to it.
Yeah. And what about how do you introduce people to the 24-hour outage requirements, all that kind of stuff?
I immediately, when I interviewed my reactor engineers, the people that I hired personally, I was honest. I said, there's a lot of cool factor to this, right? We get to do this, we get to do that. You're going to be responsible. For young people, they're like, wow, that's great. I get to do all these cool things. And then I was like, and it's a professional's job, right? We're like surgeons. Sometimes you ever hear the surgeon gets to go in at night to do a surgery for something that's some person who's ill or injured. I said, this is going to be our case too sometimes. And it's not necessarily going to be convenient. But on the other hand, you're honored with the responsibility to do that. You elevate it to that this is a responsibility that's been entrusted to you as opposed to here's this burden, here's this 24-hour thing that's going to mess with your life. Now, that's the reality. It does mess with people's lives. It messed with my life. But on the other hand is not too many individuals want to do this or called to do this. And it's a good thing and it's necessary for society.
Yeah, I love that. It's almost like an esprit de corps type argument for folks.
I'll give that to Texas A&M. I'm an Aggie, and there was always a lot of, hey, we want you to be leaders in your fields, to
Yeah.
whatever degree that is. And then some of it, my 2 years at IMPO, what an amazing experience to walk through those doors and be like, okay, here's your badge. Now you need to excel, not only as a technical individual, but in leadership and standards, right? I really found that opportunity to really polish my own behavior and my own aspects in that.
Yeah. That's great. So you talked about some of the challenges that your job brought over the years in your career. How did you manage that? How did you manage the family life in a way that your family understood and you tried to be present when you could?
I'm married really well, Bill.
Helps.
I really do. I have a wonderful wife. I don't want to say we got to do a reactor startup every month. We were not like punished in that respect. I had a lot of good colleagues where it's, look, I need to have the weekend off. We've got the kids' school fair. We're going to go on vacation. We're going to go to grandma's house for a birthday. And people in this business say, I will cover for you. And
Yeah.
likewise, when other individuals were like, I have a graduation, I covered for them. I had good people I worked with that were very helpful in that respect. And then my wife, we got married like almost, I think I was qualified. So she's seen and seen it all. She knows when the phone is calling, she can hear in my voice.
Yeah.
She doesn't even ask what time you're going to be home.
Right.
I'll be late, and she knows. And we've been blessed and managed it. So
That's great. Is there any, if you look back in your career, where you talked a lot about mentoring folks, was there any people that really inspired or mentored you throughout the years that you recall and want to give a shout out to?
I can see some of them saying, don't shout me out, but I'm going to do it anyways. Harry Goodman. Harry Goodman was a supervisor of mine. And I think from him, he taught me, he said, he used to tell me this, you're much stronger than you think you are.
Mm.
So when, as a developing engineer, we all go to our boss and we all say, I don't really know if I'm capable. I don't know if I've got the technical skills or the time. And he'd be like, you are much stronger than you think you are. And I'd walk out of the office and try to prove him right. My time at IMPO, Terry Schuster, fantastic individual about like how to prepare for assessments and evaluations and did it so joyfully. No big deal. Here we go. Let's prepare. Let's take a look at your problem statements. Always a lot of joy in that. Carl, again, just detail oriented. This is how I prepare. This is how we're going to brief. A lot of good examples, numerous operators in the control room, folks that I worked with. Joe Venable, who used to be with Entergy. A lot of individuals like that. Bill McGuire, probably when I was supervisor of reactor engineering, and we had a lot of challenging issues. He was very instrumental in how he approached problems in a professional manner and attitude. And so, yeah, 30 years, you get to work with a lot of great people.
Yeah. That's a great answer. I look back at some of the things we talked about, and you don't have to share specifics, but one of the concepts I got from you was, so if someone is put in a new position and there's a lot to learn, there's a lot going on, and you're mentoring them, you don't want them to drown with the next thing, right? And
No, you don't.
so it's almost like you strategically pick and choose what you think someone can handle. Maybe you pick up some stuff. And I think as leaders, and your leadership really points to assessing where someone's at in their journey and then helping them with that next step. How did you develop that skill, would you say, so people don't feel overwhelmed or this is the last issue, I'm out? See you later, John.
I think it's the trick or the skill that I picked up is communicate in something that they understand. So if you're trying to explain it the way you understand, that's not going to work too well. So I try to, I'm not always successful. I try to think, okay, how do I want to say this so that when the words come out of my mouth, they hear it in the manner that they can understand and it's translatable. So like for some tasks that are very difficult and will be very difficult, try to break it down into small parts. Reactor engineering, like once you start to show all the new people, here's all these qual cars and all these different things, you could sometimes see in their eyes, they're like, how am I going to put all this together? And I like to use the analogy. I said, this is like learning a language. Okay. So like, can you speak a foreign language or have you ever done that? So there's going to be a lot of vocabulary that you're going to pick up over time. And then one day, and I said, and I promise you, it's happened to a lot of people I've trained. All of a sudden, they understand the conversation. They understand the concepts. They're putting it together. And I said, you're going to get there. It's not going to be a problem. And always are like, it's not going to be a big deal because in reality, it's not a big deal. It's just a lot of little parts you got to put together.
Yeah. Well, you make it sound simple, but I love the grace in which you say things. To me, John, it's really a testament to your leadership ability to keep people calm in very difficult situations. And if you look back on your career, last question, what would you hope people would say about you when you eventually retire? You're contracted now, but you're almost there. What you hope people say?
I hope that they had fun with it. I hope they took away that we did something exciting together and that it was purposeful, that they came into the position and they just didn't do a job. They just didn't do a surveillance, right? Or an outage or a control on pattern setting, that they actually did something that was purposeful for their community, their company, themselves. That's what I would hope for.
It's simple but profound. Okay, I do have one last question.
Sure.
You're in a great part of the United States, Louisiana, near New Orleans. What's your go-to like best food if you're on death row and given one last meal?
Food,
Yeah,
Louisiana.
what would you
Yeah,
do? What
sure.
would you get?
Let me think about that a little bit. Probably a really good panade fish with
Mm.
corn machaut at Liza's in Baton Rouge. My go-to restaurant. Family, friends, and I took the entire team of engineers here there not too long ago.
Is it fancy?
Not too fancy, no, but it's all scratch cooking. It's all really good.
Yeah,
Southern Creole cooking, and
yeah.
it's where we like to run.
Yeah, if I ever get down to St. Francisville, I'll definitely look you up, John. Is that where you live?
I live in Baton Rouge. Baton Rouge is situated about 30 miles south of the plant. And it's got a great culture of sports and all that kind of great stuff. And then we're only 60 miles. So if you want to go and try all that fun stuff, you can.
Yeah, it's probably good.
You do a leadership conference out here at the site.
Yeah,
We'll have a great
definitely
dinner
get together.
afterwards.
No, it was a pleasure getting to know you better, John. What I love about your whole story is just your ability to be able to see the bigger picture, help folks along the way. And I think it's such a great testament to what you've been able to do in your career. And I really appreciate your time.
Bill, thanks for giving me the opportunity, and look forward to listening to your other podcasts. You've had some super guests.
They're only getting better. Thank you,
All right.
John.
Thanks a lot, friend.
All right. Take care.
Bye.
One of the stories I love that John tells is how to help someone that's young and new in the industry to not feel overwhelmed. Now, some might say he perhaps takes on too much of that person's responsibility. What I would suggest is he's trying to find that balance between not overwhelming someone with information and acknowledging the fact of where they are on that journey, especially when it comes to communication and moving away from just the technical details. So that's what I suggest you think about after you hear this podcast episode, that it's a bigger picture thing you got to look at. It's a long game, and try to mentor people and help them out. And if you don't mind, tell a couple of friends about the show. And this is Bill Nowicki saying, here's my last intro into bullshit. That's it for this episode of The Nuclear Leader. Thanks for joining me as we shine a light on the people powering nuclear safety and success. If you're inspired to lead better, subscribe, share, and drop us a review. Until next time, stay sharp and keep leading the way.